are delighted to have with us this evening the Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi. Venerable, thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us today, to share your wisdom with us. We know how busy your schedule is, so it's indeed a privilege and honor to have you in person in Singapore. Venerable Priyadarshi is a Buddhist monk, ordained by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and speaks globally on ethical imagination and moral purpose. He entered a monastery of his own volition at the age of 10 and received graduate education at Harvard University with degrees ranging from philosophy to physics to international relations. He is president and CEO of the Dalai Lama Center of Ethics and Transformation Values at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he founded Prashnapaya, a charitable organization dedicated to worldwide humanitarian relief, and is also an institute for Buddhist studies. He has authored 2 books, and one is actually being sold downstairs. It's called Running Towards Mystery, and all proceeds are to the Buddhist Library if you buy one. And it's at the forefront of discussions of governance and emerging technologies. Today, Venerable will speak on parting from the 4 attachments and how this contemplation will truly open our hearts and minds to living our best life. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Venerable Priyadarshi.
Samutpadam prapancho pashvan shivam Dhishyama sambhastam vande vaditavarnam Buddham gacchami sharanam yavada bodhi mandata Dhammam gacchami sharanam bodhi sattvagnandada Sarvasa diksha sammadam prartyam kritanjali Dhammadipam kurvantu mohadata pravadiram Akasha satriyavadi avachajagadastidihi Tamam satrabhuya jagat dukkhani nimada Manjulo Shangamasami Yat Prasadam Adishava Kalyana Mitram Mandayam Yat Prasadach Bhagate Namastare Ture Vira Tuttare Bhayanashani Ture Sarvature Kala Swaham Karanamamiham Ye Dharma Hetu Prabha Hetum Te Shantada Vritatu Te Shanchanirodai Vangvadi Mahashrama. Good evening. It's a delight to be back, to be able to spend a little bit of time this evening. The theme for our conversation this evening is parting from 4 attachments. One of my favorite texts. 1, because it's just in 4 sentences. I like short texts as opposed to really long text. Sometimes I start long text and don't have time to finish them. Then we spend about a year or 2 trying to complete it. So short text, we have enough time to touch base on some of the meaningful sort of points. Short in Buddhist tradition does not mean short in quality. The technical term sometimes in English that we use is pithy instructions or pith instructions, meaning that it's straight to the point, without too much paraphernalia, and that every expression, every terminology matters. So it's pithy in that regard. And this particular text, it has a slightly interesting history in the sense that the legend says that one of the renowned masters of the Sakya tradition in Tibet, Dragpa Gyaltsen, that this text appeared to him during meditation retreat. He was doing a long retreat on Manjushri, Bodhisattva wisdom. And sort of Manjushri appeared and dictated these 4 sentences to him. Those days, it was a common occurrence for deities to appear and give transmissions and teachings. I tend to believe it. These days, when people say deities appear, I tend to be skeptical. Far too many claims, far too wide of claims. There are sort of various genres of literature in the Buddhist tradition, as most of you are aware. You have sort of spoken words of the Buddha, then divided into 3 categories of Sutra, Abhidharma, and Vinaya. Then there's a whole commentary traditions written by disciples of the Buddha or later Buddhist masters. Even in the Indian tradition, you will find at times references to deities appearing in front of a practitioner, guiding them about certain kinds of practices, sometimes either in form of a transmission, a teaching. So there were many kind of, there's a whole genre of visions and teachings that you find in spiritual traditions. Later on, sort of, it became also quite common to suggest that certain individuals would hide the teachings for an appropriate time in the future. For example, the legend around the perfection of wisdom is that Buddha taught it, and then the Nagas hid it under the ocean for an appropriate time until somebody like Nagarjuna came about. Then he retrieved the teachings and then gave transmissions on it. It rained so much in Singapore, I'm always reminded of the Nagas. In the Buddhist worldview, there's an association between Nagas and rainfall. So Nagas were polite and they returned it to, they gave the teachings to Nagarjuna to expound. And then there's a whole tradition also of Theramas, where certain individuals supposedly hid the teachings, and then later on some individuals will have visions of finding teachings under a rock or places like that. It's a good context, it's a useful context. I think what I derive from it is the appropriateness of time and place of a teaching, of a certain kind of teaching. And so timing is of course of tremendous importance. And parting from 4 attachments, this particular teaching, in some ways is good for all times and all places. It's very succinct, and the way it has been outlined is a wonderful sort of reminder, especially for practitioners, in terms of how to think about spiritual practices, spiritual cultivations, and so on. So the first sentence, the first verse is, if attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. If you're attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. Maybe I should read the whole thing first and then we'll go on to this. If attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. If attached to the 3 realms, you have no renunciation. If attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. If there's grasping, you do not have the view. So if attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner. Buddhism sort of, like several spiritual and religious traditions, juggles between giving some sort of importance or primacy to this life versus the next life and the life before. Meaning in most religious traditions, much of the emphasis is about the afterlife. Like you're practicing in this life, and either the worldview suggests you go to a heaven or a hell realm, or it suggests that you melt into the cosmic blob of some sort. There are all kinds of worldviews, but oftentimes the suggestion that is made is that this life is sort of transient in nature. It's more of a training ground. It's more of a examination of sorts. That's kind of the context that is often suggested. Unless you become a materialist, like the Charvakas in ancient India, or materialists in the European sense, then the sense was that there was nothing more than this life. That whatever life you had, whatever time you had here, this is it. There's no sort of future life. And so the Charvakas had a very endearing saying, endearing in the sense it said, beg, buy, borrow, or steal, this is all you have. When you live this life comfortably, in whichever way you can find this sense of comfort. The Buddhists, however, have a slightly different view in the sense that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in terms of the way we look at life and death, the way we look at patterns in the universe of origins and dissolution and so on, that it would be too easy of a worldview to simply think that things end when you die. Things may end when you die in a certain sense, but in other sense that there is some kind of continuity, some kind of change in continuity that is constantly occurring. And so the Buddhist suggestion is, of course, that our consciousness is ever-flowing in the sense that unless and until you attain nirvana, you will be coming back into different realms of existence. And the premise there is also that there are aspects of this life that we get clingy about, meaning that we like something for a period of time and we grasp to it. And in some ways, even the aspect of what is this life about, what's the purpose or meaning of this life, becomes a sum total of all our graspings. And when you look at what motivates you to live, we come up with different kinds of stories of what motivates us to live, but at the end of the day, it becomes a sum total of all our graspings. And these graspings, evolve all the time. Meaning that it's not that you're grasping to a particular object or a particular individual or a particular scenario. That these things evolve over a period of time. Even you may have heard me say this before here, that even when people sort of think that they're going to renounce certain things, that they're going to leave behind certain things, we're not able to override this mechanic of grasping. See, all we do is we leave behind certain objects of attachment. We move on to other objects of attachment. So we are not really good at detachment unless and until some other attractive, valuable objects, individuals, scenarios present themselves. So we as humans get very good at rotating our objects of attachment. Meaning that, you may say that, I'm getting old or I've evolved and I don't have that many attachments. But if you look at it, yes, in all likelihood, you're not attached to the same things you were attached to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But it's not that you don't have attachment. You have simply replaced that object of attachment with other objects of attachment, either tangible intangible or otherwise. And the premise in the Buddhist tradition is that those attachments, those sense of grasping, is what we think constitutes life. So it is that kind of life that the tradition suggests, or what is suggested here, is that one should not gravitate towards. It's not to suggest that life itself is something not worth living. There are all these, so this is what I mean, the paradox. In one Buddhist text, it suggested about human life, and you would hear this often echoed in the tradition. They will always say, precious human life, precious human life. Meaning the idea being that this text suggests, again, it's a hyperbolic analogy, but it suggests that imagine, a turtle, a gigantic turtle, deep in the bed of ocean, and surfaces every 1,000 years. Again, depending on the text, it may say 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Let's go with 1,000. So surfaces every 1,000 years. He surfaces, is there over 1,000 years? And imagine that there's a wooden ring. And the tradition goes to say that the probability of the turtle rising up and the ring coinciding at the same time so the turtle can put his neck underneath the ring. You see? Imagine the rare occurrence. The vast ocean, every 1,000 years, this thing is floating around somewhere. And so human life is that rare occurrence. But then it keeps telling you, well, don't enjoy this, don't grasp this, don't get attached to this. And so individuals start to wonder, well, how are we supposed to live this life without this sense of grasping, without this sense of attachment? What is it, GPS?
Is the turtle talking?
So there's the sense of preciousness of human life, but at the same time, the tradition is suggesting that be cautious in terms of how you spend your time here. Be cautious in terms of how is it that you're spending your time here. Now, within the Buddhist tradition, there are variations of opinion around how do we utilize our time here. As I said, some schools focus on the afterlife. Other schools will focus more on the sense that live your life to the fullest. Be of service, be kind, be compassionate, learn new things, meaning cultivate a sense of wisdom. And those are all sort of aspects of living a good life. So very rarely individuals get into this idea of what is a good life. And you can argue about perspectives, and it's all subjective and so on. But at the end of the day, we have finite amount of time. And what the tradition is suggesting is don't dilly-dally, meaning you don't know how much time do you have. And simply focus on the present in terms of the time that you have, and make sure that your life is intentional, make sure that your life is taught through in terms of meaning, not just informed or influenced by social norms and so on. So if attached to this life, you're not a Dharma practitioner, implying that as a Dharma practitioner, you are on a regular basis reflecting on the notion of meaningfulness of life. That doesn't mean that you're not living your life. That doesn't mean that you're simply sort of theorizing about what I should be doing in life. That's another challenge, that sometimes we spend too much time creating a theoretical framework of what a good life will be. And either we don't live that long, or even when we get there, we are greeted by other kinds of surprises that we were not prepared for. And that also sort of throws us off in terms of what a good life is. So Dharma practitioner, like that, don't have clinging to this sense of life, don't have clinging to what the social norms might dictate is a good life. I was having this conversation the other day with somebody, and our notions of success, our notions of accomplishments, and so on. Oftentimes, they simply boil down to wealth, as in material success, relationships, and things of that nature. But nobody prepares you for certain things. There's a study done in the US that shows the misery of lottery winners. And they win lotteries, and within 6 months, they lose good friends, they lose relationships, they attract negative kind of people, and so on. Now they have all the money they want, but they were not prepared how to handle it. So in our education system also, we get the encouragement to be successful in life, but nobody teaches you how to handle success, power, luck. If we were taught all those things, we'll have better leaders and better politicians and so on. It's sort of just, you're there, and then you have to deal with it. There's no sense of preparedness around what it means to be successful and so on. So this constant reflection as a Dharma practitioner, and not grasping to sort of the transient elements of this life, because this life, the Buddhists are suggesting, is a wonderful opportunity to cultivate certain kinds of virtues, recognize the nature of reality, but more importantly, growing in certain kind of spiritual journey or spiritual path. Now, one of the things is that the tradition goes on to suggest that this life, again, there are a lot of misnomers in the book, in pop culture, for example. When people face certain kind of misery and this, that, and the other, they say this is karma. This is my karma. I've rarely met somebody who became very successful and attributed everything to karma. Life is going wonderful. This is karma too. Very rarely have I met anybody, but all the negativities, they attribute it to karma. So it creates this kind of misnomer, misconception that somehow, every aspect of our life is driven by some past karma. That is not true. Past karma, just following notions of causation or dependent origination, it has its place, but we are constantly creating new karma, and this new karma sort of continues to guide what the future events might be. When individuals used to bug Milarepa, the Tibetan master, about constantly inquiring, well, what was my past life, what would my future life would be, and so on. So Milarepa goes on and he says, if you want to know your past, observe your present. If you want to know your future, watch your present. Meaning that this present moment is the culmination of what has been happening in the past, but it is also this present moment and how you respond, react, act in this present moment that would dictate what your future might be like. So a Dharma practitioner is looking at life in that particular manner, that this is an opportunity to do certain things in a manner that if there are things that should be avoided, if there are things that I do not like, then I should work on it in a manner that I don't have to deal with it in the future. Otherwise, our habitual patterns become so strong that the same patterns surfaces and resurfaces in future lifetimes as well. Now, of course, we have amnesia, we lose memory, we don't have memory of previous life, we don't even have memory of all the stuff we do in previous years in terms of who we heard, who we pleased, and all this stuff. But such things, grow stronger with time in terms of patterns, and they show up again, they resurface again in the next life. And I've tried to sort of suggest this to folks that, it's all right for us to romanticize the idea of rebirth and say, oh, there's another life, and then another life, and then another life. Meaning that we'll have plenty of opportunity to correct our patterns, to meditate more, to enjoy this thing called nirvana. There's plenty of future time. But right now, that for better or for worse, we are immersed in the samsaric life, and this is what we have. Family is great, jobs are great, retirement is going according to plan, everything is fabulous. And it's like, from a Buddhist perspective, it's like, that's great, but you do realize you have done this 1,000 times. When you're looking from outside, life of an individual that way, it's like, when you look at toddlers and they make the same mistake again and again. Like they fall down, then depending on who's around them, either they burst into tears or they laugh and get up like nothing has happened. But then they fall down again, then they get up again, and this time they may have bruised themselves, they cry, then ADD kicks in, and then they go into a different direction, and then they start laughing. But the mom, the parents or the mother, every time the child falls, her heart drops. That the child is going to get hurt, or the child might have something in this thing. So the tradition suggests, bodhisattvas are like those mothers, watching the child, drop for 1,000 times in this life. So, coming into this life, going out of this life. So after a while, the observation is that, isn't it getting boring? Like, aren't you guys done with it? Like, move on now. It's the same cycle of things. It's just that, because we don't have continuous memory of these things, it's very hard to recall all this stuff. And oftentimes, it's only in scenarios where things are not going according to plan that we begin to question the whole existential pattern of what am I doing wrong, or what's going on with this world, and so on. So the key thing, again, is if you're attached to this slide, then in some ways you're moving away from the aspect of dharma. The other part is that if your dharma practice is simply to fulfill the goals of this life, then also you're not practicing dharma. Meaning that, people come to religion for all kinds of reasons. Buddha Dharma was decisively about liberation. It was from Buddha's first teachings were freedom from suffering. It's constantly talking about freedom from suffering. How did it get from freedom from suffering to let's do a puja for a successful business so that I can make $1 gazillion? I have no idea. How did it go from there to there? I have no idea. But this is the challenge that humans face, which is that we repurpose anything that we consider of value of power to meet our desires, to meet our needs. So now, if you take a pattern here, which is that how can I be a dharma practitioner if I'm trying to repurpose dharma just to suit the needs of this life? Just to suit the needs of this life. That, one of my most amusing observations used to be as a kid when I would go to temples in India when growing up, especially in Hindu temples, because it was right in your face kind of thing happening, where people would come and engage in kind of an active negotiation with the deity. If my son gets married to a good woman, I'm going to donate 1,001 rupee. If my son gets a good job, I'm going to donate 1,001 rupee. Or if my daughter gets a good husband, I'll donate 100,000 rupees and so on. And then mindlessly, their devotional verses will be, in Hindi it goes, "Tera tujhko arpan," that everything belongs to you, I'm returning it to you. And I'm like, do you see the hilarious context that just now you were bribing 1,000 rupees, and next moment you're saying everything belongs to you? You see? Meaning that this kind of pattern where the devotion also becomes in some ways misguided, that it's all about this life. it's all about repurposing things for this life. Not for freedom from suffering, but just to get rid of temporal misery. Just to get rid of misery temporarily. So that's the choice. It's like, do this, and you'll be free forever. Might even become a Buddha. Do this, and you'll be free. You'll experience a sense of relief for a week, a year, and most people will just opt for this particular queue. They won't go into this particular queue. Because I think that after a period of time, people even fear freedom. People fear liberation. And that's sort of the sorry state to be in. When we begin to romanticize all that binds us, when we begin to romanticize bondage itself, such that freedom appears to be fearful. That's kind of where the tradition is highlighting and saying that you cannot justify this idea of practicing Dharma and sort of this overt grasping to certain aspects of this life. So it's not that living this life is discouraged. It's simply saying, how is it that you're living this life? What's the intention? What's the motivation? And where is the trajectory of this life taking you? And all the nuances that, it's not suggesting that you shouldn't become rich, you shouldn't become successful at work, or you shouldn't have good relationships. But it is constantly suggesting that you should reevaluate. You should reevaluate whether, is this the only reason, is this the only purpose that you are engaging in the activities that you're engaging in. And especially it becomes a challenge when, at the back of our head, we identify ourselves as spiritual practitioners or Dharma practitioners. But this is also a tendency, and I've said it multiple times before, which is that we think of spiritual practice or religious practice simply as an add-on. See? Like we go on about our daily business as we have been going around for the entirety of our life. And then we try to rationalize to ourselves, but I'm a spiritual person because I show up at temples every Thursdays, or I show up at retreats every weekend, or I go to temples every Sundays, and so on. And not recognizing that we have an opportunity to create this spiritual thread of life that permeates all aspects of our life. Rather than that, it just becomes another hobby-like thing. It's an add-on. That I'm doing all these things, and by the way, I'm also a spiritual individual. By the way, I'm also a Christian or a Buddhist or whatnot. So the reminder here again is reevaluating your own sort of priorities about this life. And the Dharma, the teaching of Dharma, Buddha Dharma, can offer a helpful lens. It can offer a helpful lens to look through and suggest, what might be a useful trajectory, what might be useful in terms of prioritizing things in life. And he said, if attached to the three realms, you have no renunciation. Renunciation is a wonderful theme in the Buddhist world, also in several traditions. Renunciation implies that you have recognized that grasping is happening. You have recognized that there's attachment to things. And you decide that now you see the nature of things as is, you see the nature of reality as it, and perhaps it's time to renounce such things. Renunciation is not when somebody takes things away from you. Renunciation is not when things get away from you because of natural calamity, sickness, illness, and so on. Renunciation is a willful act of giving up. It's a willful act of giving up. And Tsongkhapa, one of the Tibetan masters, suggests that renunciation is the doorway to spiritual life, meaning that you cannot enter spiritual life without having understood and actualized the practice of renunciation itself. Renunciation, on one hand, is a very efficient process in terms of not wasting your time or not wasting your bandwidth on things things that are unnecessary. So, generally when we talk about renunciation and people go into, well, do I have to leave my family or a house, things that I've gathered, my advice to them often is that, no, start with renouncing things that you really don't like. Are you happy with your anger? Are you happy with jealousy, envy? These mental states. Are they bringing anything conducive for your spiritual life? If they're not, begin with renouncing those things first. But even renouncing anger is a challenging act for many individuals. Even though they enter a framework and say, this is not good for me, and not good for people around me, not good for creating wholesome conditions for relationships and so on. But people somehow are still clinging on to this disposition of anger or jealousy or envy and so on. So you begin by such acts of renunciation, and then you extend this notion of renunciation to other aspects of your life. But again, renunciation is not done out of indifference. It is not done out of aversion to things purely. Renunciation is a willful, thoughtful giving up of things, meaning that this thing is not conducive to my spiritual life. Or even things like, this thing is more valuable to this other person, not to me at this time. So renunciation can occur in many different forms. But, one has to sort of get accustomed to the idea of renunciation. We seldom experience renunciation in that manner. We experience loss. And we have a whole spectrum of loss, from minor loss to great loss to loss where life won't be the same again. But these are loss. These are not your willful act of renunciation. These are causes and conditions coming together and taking something away from you. So in that loss, we are generally just learning to deal with pain. Renunciation is an act of joy. Renunciation is not, where it's like an act of, that the aftermath is painful. Renunciation is done joyfully. And the aftermath is also a sense of joy that comes with it. So the element here that being suggested is that if you're attached to the three realms meaning the kama dhatu, rupa dhatu, arupa dhatu, the realm of desire, the realm of forms, and the realm of formless. Meaning that in the Buddhist worldview, these are, broadly speaking, what is defined as the planes of existence, or the realms of existence that the consciousness kind of lives in or takes on. And so, in any of these realms, when we are there, like if the mind is just overtly in the state of karma, or the mind is in a lot of in the state of form, but then there's also this sort of interplay of form and desire. Selfies is an interplay of form and desire. I'm sure there'll be research coming out very soon how selfies increase narcissism in individuals. It's kind of remarkable to observe. Like, as a monk, in some ways, you become a student of human behavior. You like to see how patterns evolve, how human behavior evolves. And it's just remarkable that how our sense of beauty has changed just since the selfie generation. But not just the selfie generation, even old folks are doing that. And it's kind of interesting, like the amount of effort that goes. You're holding the camera, and you're trying to adjust your face so you can get the right angle, the right expression, the right sense of slimness, plus sort of surrounding the context. And sometimes you're so absorbed in taking a selfie that you forget that you're standing on a railway track. You get hit by a train, or you fall from a mountain cliff. These are miserable states to be in. But it's all prompted by this interplay of karma and rupa, the interplay of form and the desire aspect. How our perception of self-image has changed. A couple of weeks ago, I was at the Vatican, and then walked into a museum, and nearby. I like some old Italian masters, and just observing individuals and the paintings and the statues, and you see how the whole notion of beauty has changed in terms of what we think has become expressions of beauty today, in terms of both how the self should look like, how the self-image should look like, how other people should look like, and so on. But a lot of it is just mindless. A lot of it is just mindless. It's not even that individuals have a sense of aesthetics or a theory of aesthetics around it to say why this thing is beautiful. It's like, no, if I can get 10,000 likes doing this thing, I'll do it. And so now, popularity is what dictates the sense of beauty or sense of aesthetics for a lot of people. So you keep seeing these kinds of interplay over a period of time. And this sort of continues to contribute to the rigidity of mental patterns, meaning that even the rigidity that did not exist before, in terms of what the self-image is. It's one thing to be concerned about your physical well-being and health. It's another thing to completely be engrossed in the idea of appearances. And it's another scale where you're so engrossed in the idea of experiences that in terms of appearances, that you want it to be the same appearance for the next 30 years of your life. That's another thing I haven't understood. I think as much as old age is inevitable, I think it requires bravery. You have to be brave to get old. The amount of I'm not saying I'm looking forward to it. I'm just saying that you have to be brave to get old. And past few years, sort of, I've been spending so much time with colleagues and friends and research and other kinds of platforms discussing longevity. And there's a plethora of longevity researches that are coming out. And in the entire sort of conversation, there's no discussion around meaning. There's no discussion around purposefulness. There's no conversation around things like grace. And those are the things that concern me, meaning that, of course, I want everybody to live a long life. And let's presume each one of you gets to live for 200 years. What are you going to do with your time? 200 years. Will you do more of the same? Or what will change? Let's say you were given a blessing through science and through religion to live for 200 years. What would shift? And so the whole idea is, again, that it's within the realm of the interplay of form, desire, formlessness. But it's still this kind of sense of grasping. And so this sense of renunciation doesn't dawn in. Renunciation is this active act of letting go. But letting go with a sense of joy. Letting go with a sense that it's not necessary at this point in my life. Because at any given time, it is true that perhaps we live in a time when we are constantly plagued with choices. It's not that we are given choices, we're just plagued with choices. Maybe individuals 10,000 years ago didn't have these many choices. But the fact that our mind is simply oscillating between these different kinds of choices and not being able to arrive at a decision or arrive at a choice that would add or would contribute to a sense of fulfillment, to truly a sense of joy, meaning rather than just this fleeting sense of things. It's like, there's a research done around this too, where people buy products, they buy the product. When they are in line to get the product, there's super excitement and slight nervousness. Will I get it or not get it? Will it be sold out or not sold out? Then they get the product. then they pay for the product, then they open the box, and the joy level goes down. You see? Meaning that, and we do this, over a period of time, and with people, with object, and these kinds of things. So the focus on renunciation here is also in terms of it helps us to prioritize what is actually important rather than getting lost in different kinds of choices. Now, Buddhism is not telling you exactly what your choices ought to be. All it is suggesting is don't waste your time. All it is suggesting is that renunciation could be a useful sort of practice to frame what is actually important, what actually matters in your life. Then you think about other forms of renunciation. For example, generosity too is an aspect of renunciation. Dedication of merit as well is an aspect of renunciation. So renunciation occurs in all forms, and one of the most sort of wonderful description of renunciation that occurs in the Buddhist tradition is the life of Avalokiteshvara, Bodhisattva of compassion. He has gone through several lifetimes, several phases, has entire qualification into entry into nirvana. But he's renouncing nirvana so that he can come back and help other sentient beings, meaning that compassion, in his case, overrides this desire to enter into nirvana as well. In the sense that I will go into nirvana when other sentient beings have gone into nirvana. That's sort of the epitome of renunciation. So it's both the gateway into spiritual path, into spiritual practice, but it's also sort of an actualization of the fruits of practice to enter into to experience renunciation. Then in your own meditation practice also, renunciation is important. You're meditating, you experience a certain state. And the state is, let's say, joyful, blissful, and so on. And if you simply cling to that state and you say, this is all I was looking for, or this is all that meditation is about, that you're not able to renounce that state to move on. It's very much like, imagine a bud, like a flower bud. And the bud goes, no, I'm happy in this state, I don't want to blossom. I don't want to blossom. I am happy. Cute, round, colorful. I don't want to blossom. And the fruit and the flower then goes, I don't want to turn into a fruit. I'm just happy being a flower. I don't want to turn into a fruit. That's what we do to ourselves when we are not looking at renouncing of certain fruits of meditation. We trap ourselves in that particular state. We become self-absorbed in that particular state. And we say, oh, this is what there is. And we can't let go of things. So it's not that renunciation is an issue just in conventional life. Renunciation also becomes a matter of spiritual life, meaning what it is within spiritual life that you're doing that constantly requires to exercise renunciation. So the tradition will often remind individuals that renunciation is the key. Otherwise, trappings, graspings, attachments, they occur in all stages of life. They occur in all forms of life. Just because you have shifted, your lifestyle to another life, doesn't mean that the grasping will not happen. My favorite example is when people proclaim that they're simplifying their life. And then I say, how? And they tell me they're downsizing their house, and they're downsizing this, that, and the other. And it's nice. It's nice to know what is actually necessary, what is actually needed, and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're downsizing, you're grasping. Meaning, all it means is that it could be that now you're bringing together all the objects of grasping into one roof. Before you were just having difficulty finding them in a big place. Now they are right in front of you. See? So there are different ways of thinking of how you do simplifying of life as well. So it's important that we think about renunciation, repeatedly, in terms of both prioritization, reprioritization, in terms of goals and values in life, but also recognizing that, however it is that you wish to approach the spiritual path, that it is the gateway, it is the key. And begin with even renunciation of toxic mental patterns. Then begin with the renunciation of things that contribute to those toxic mental patterns. And then you move on from there. Don't start with a big goal of, I'm just going to renounce everything and enter a cave or go into a forest. Generally, it doesn't work out very well. Less than 1%, maybe, but generally it doesn't work out very well. It's kind of a very impulsive. Renunciation is not an impulsive act. It's a very sort of it has to be very thoughtful and so on. Right? If attached to your own self-interest, you have no bodhicitta. And this is, sort of a recurring theme in the Buddhist tradition. That, again, just like the first line, it is not suggesting that you should not look after your interest. It is not suggesting that you shouldn't take care of yourself. All it is suggesting is that your sense of taking care of yourself or looking after your own interest should not become an exercise in self-cherishment. It should not become an exercise in self-cherishment to the point that others do not matter. To the point where others are seen or viewed as lesser than yourself. And somehow, my life is more unique, more important than the person next to me. So self-cherishment has sort of these different multiplier effects, but all of it both emerges from this ego, and then it goes on to inflate this ego. And self-cherishment, again, like anything else, can occur both in conventional life and spiritual life as well. The sense of uniqueness, the sense that, I'm unique, I'm great, I'm wonderful. You are all that. You don't need to constantly talk yourself into it. It kind of leads to kind of a toxic mindset where this constant sort of expression of I and me and mine, and the notion of self-cherishment that comes with it. Now, the other aspect of it is that sometimes, even when you are starting your practice, and you're starting your practice with a sense of self-cherishment, most people, very few people start their practice thinking I'm going to do good for other people. Most people start their practice wanting to better their lives, better their mental states and so on. Right? It doesn't mean you need to stick to that particular pathway, forever. At some point, you can change your mindset and you say, now, I have to recognize what it is that I'm practicing for. So generally what happens in practical terms, so even your meditation practice, if it is simply rooted in self-cherishment, after a while, it just becomes about you. And the ego is inflated. And your practice doesn't gain traction in the sense that all the spiritual qualities are still not cultivated. They're still not sort of blossoming in you. Why? Because you're self-absorbed. It's all about this ego. It's all about the self. And that's why in Mahayana tradition, in Vajrayana tradition, one of the focus from the very beginning is that take others into consideration, take others into concern. That is not to say that Theravada doesn't have it. I think Theravada tradition probably has more bodhisattvas these days than Mahayana and Vajrayana. I'll get into trouble for saying that. That's how it is. Bodhisattvas don't wear a tag saying I'm a bodhisattva. Or if they do wear a t-shirt saying I'm a bodhisattva, they don't do bodhisattva like that. You have to look at the quality, you have to study the quality of bodhisattva figures. But from the from early stage of meditation practice, if you're able to take others into your concern, that yes, I'm suffering, but others are suffering too. And though I want to find a remedy for my suffering, wouldn't it be wonderful that I can also help others? There's nothing telling you that you cannot do that. That, you know, sometimes we think that it becomes mutually exclusive. You know, like in the West, there's this whole concept of my space. Stay away from my space, or that I'm going to focus on me. These are common expressions that we think. It should not be mutually exclusive. That just because I'm focusing on me doesn't mean I cannot focus on other people, and so on. So meditation is a wonderful opportunity where you are there with yourself, but you're shifting your mind to say, no, but I am going to take others into my concern, my field of care, and so on. That is not suggesting that you just get up from your meditation and start helping others, but you're sort of habituating the mind. You're making the mind familiar with this idea that I am as others are. I suffer as others do. I desire freedom as much as others desire freedom. And that creates this kind of camaraderie, so to speak, with sentient beings. So now when you're meditating, it's not just for your own self. You're meditating for sentient beings. You're meditating for all the individuals that you have come across or will come across in the future time. You see. So that's where you can also counter the idea of meditating alone. People think, that sometimes meditation becomes a lonely exercise. I'm surrounded by sentient beings. How can I be alone? And more importantly, if even sitting solo in meditation, my mind is constantly thinking about how to care for sentient beings and so on, you don't feel the sense of loneliness. You don't feel the sense of being alone. So there's this beauty in the tradition of visualization exercises where it says that you're meditating, but you're surrounded by a retinue of enlightened beings, and you're surrounded by a retinue of sentient beings. So physically the body is there, but the mind is sort of interconnected with all that exists. And that also allows us to move away from any form of self-cherishment or self-absorption. Because meditation, as I mentioned yesterday during the teaching, that meditation can become a highly self-absorbed exercise. Meditations can produce Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and meditations can also produce neurotic, psychotic individuals. Meditation is a gateway to renunciation, to enlightenment, but if grasped wrongly, meditation can also enhance a sense of narcissism. In fact, a more dangerous form of narcissism than conventional narcissism. Because this form of narcissism, you think you're God. You think you're enlightened. Other forms of narcissism, you're still ignorant. You're still sort of, I'm the center of the universe, but maybe I'm ignorant. This spiritual narcissism is very toxic. So, the care for sentient beings, the concern for sentient beings, allows us from day one to avoid these pitfalls of self-cherishment, self-absorption, spiritual narcissism, spiritual evil, and things of that nature. And when we are able to take that path and reflect on it, that creates the condition for the generating state of bodhicitta, this enlightened mind, the awakened mind. And then you take this bodhicitta to another level of great compassion, just like in the example of Avalokiteshvara, where you start to look at all sentient beings as with the sense of sameness. I think I mentioned this before also, that Buddhists, when they speak of compassion, it's not the ordinary act of compassion. I think, ordinary act of kindness or compassion, your daily experience of it, is not what Buddhists are talking about. Your daily act of kindness and compassion is a function of nearness, proximity, dearness, endearment, mood swings. See, that's what dictates your day-to-day kindness. Today I feel like being kind, I'm going to be kind. But I'm not going to be kind to a random person. I'm going to be kind to a friend or a family member or somebody who who can repay my kindness. There are some people who are very calculative about their kindness. It's even their act of kindness is a return on investment kind of mindset. So, you see, those kinds of things we are all used to. It's a part of our biological function, evolutionary function. That is not cultivation. Meaning, if your brain is wired somewhat rightly, you will have empathy, you will have some degree of kindness, and so on. When the Buddhists are suggesting about compassion and kindness, they're saying, well, can you work beyond your biases? Can you work beyond the idea that this person is a friend, and this person is a family, and that's why I'll be nice to them? Can you extend it to say, I'll extend the same courtesy to a stranger. I'll be kind to them. I'll extend the same courtesy to even individuals that I do not like. I'll be kind to them. That's where cultivation comes in. That's where discipline is. Otherwise, our day-to-day act of kindness, discipline, compassion, and generosity is oftentimes a function of mood swing. You ask yourself, how many times in a year have you told yourself, today's just not my day to be kind? That today I just don't feel like it. When you're on the Bodhisattva path, that's not what your cultivation of compassion is about. It's not tethered to your mood swings. It's not tethered to the idea that, I won't be kind because this person is not a family, because I don't like this person, or this person is not a friend. All those kinds of criteria. So, cultivation of kindness or compassion in the pretext of bodhicitta is that it allows you to evaluate your own biases and then break free from those biases so that your virtue cultivation is not tethered to these biases. So one of the things of the Buddhist is not that you say, oh, of course I'm a kind person. Of course I'm a kind person. No, who have you been kind to lately? There's a comedian gives an example that people are like, getting into the plane, you're sitting in business class, and sitting there reclining, and then suddenly, you see an elderly person or somebody in need passing through you, going into the economy class. And in your mind you say, wouldn't it be nice if this person could have a business class seat so they could travel comfortably? And then the second thought that comes in, I'm such a great individual that I had that thought that this person should sit in business class. Meaning that even a thought of kindness sometimes becomes so self-congratulatory. You haven't done the act. It's all happening in imagination. But it becomes heavily self-congratulatory. And, oh, I'm such a kind person. I'm such a generous person. The cultivation of bodhicitta implies, is it free from biases? It is free from seeking acknowledgement. Is it free from seeking, sort of any kind of validation and so on? Ordinary kindness and compassion is driven mostly because of biases, sense of acknowledgement, sense of validation, and so on. So there's a major difference between how the Buddhists are speaking of compassion and kindness in terms of cultivation versus the ordinary sense of things. So it's not to say that ordinary stuff is not good. If you do it, it's wonderful. But that is not to say that you shouldn't cultivate this sense of mahakaruna or great compassion that the Buddhists are speaking of. And then finally it says, if there's grasping, you do not have the view. In the Eightfold Path, the first thing that it begins with is right view. Samyam drishti, samyam ditti. And it's not as opposed to a wrong view or a left view. It's a moderate view. But part of this aspect of moderation is that, is it a view that you are attached to or not? So we have all kinds of opinions. Our brain fires all kinds of thoughts at any given point in time. It would be a mistake to say just because I think of myself as important, anything that arises in my brain as a thought is an important thought. Meaning that you have to, again, get into this process of refinement that not every thought in your brain is a valuable thought. Similarly, not every opinion that arises in you is a valuable opinion. Yes, you may hold it dear, you may tell yourself that it's a wonderful opinion. Why? Because I'm such a wonderful person. But that wonderful opinion may have no validity. Meaning, its validity is only because you thought of it and you're holding it dear. The key thing in the Buddhist world is that you're looking at this mechanism of grasping to a view. Grasping to a view, meaning that why do we have opinions? Why do we have certain belief systems? Because beliefs are also at the end of the day, another form of bias. Why do you believe in something? You don't believe in something because you have evaluated it. You believe in something because people tell you to. You believe in something because you grew up with that kind of belief system. Or you believe in something because you may have had a certain experience that you think is so wonderful that it creates an entire belief. But it's not that we constantly analyze all of our beliefs. So that also starts to create a certain change in sort of how we look at the world. Meaning that if I look at the world by saying people of dark skin are less bright or intelligent than people in light skin, it's a belief. It's not a proven belief, but it's a belief that one can hold true. And if they hold true, what does it lead to? It leads to racism. So the thing is that we have a variety of different kinds of belief that can manifest itself in all forms of toxicity at social level and so on. And so it's important that these belief systems themselves are evaluated, that they are corrected. But there's no point in practicing meditation if you're not able to self-correct. If you're not able to correct your views, let go of certain views, learn to evaluate certain views, then there's no point in meditation. So you're wasting your time. Much of meditation is about self-correction. You observe and you say, this doesn't ring true, I should let go of it. Sometimes that letting go is not as easy as it sounds. Why? Because you have cultivated it, you have cherished it over a long period of time. So the key thing here is grasping to the meaning. Even as a Buddhist, it's a key aspect that this notion that I have the truth is a belief system. The notion that I am the chosen one is also a belief system. And Buddha tried to caution us against this. Buddha, he said, everybody's a chosen one. You're all born to become Buddhas. No exception. Doesn't matter nationality, ethnicity, territory, and so on. Everybody's born to become a Buddha. Even dogs and cats. No exception. So, when he taught, and the manner in which he taught, it created sort of a certain degree of egalitarian approach to Dharma, meaning that you couldn't create this sense of discrimination that I'm special, this person is not special. So if you listen straight to Buddha's teachings. But if you start to develop it in a sense that I have the truth, or I have the special practice, and so on, unless and until it's empirically and otherwise proven, all it is a belief system, it's a belief bias. And all you're doing is grasping onto it. And so, from certain perspective, even grasping to Buddha Dharma is a grasping. Even grasping to Buddha's teaching in a manner that you're not growing with it is a grasping. So this is sort of, again, where it says that if there's grasping, then there is no view. Meaning you don't have the right view. You're not entertaining the right view. Why? Because everything is overcome with grasping. Everything is overcome with attachment. In the Chan tradition, or Zen later in Japan, the teachers try to show you and demonstrate like quite what you would suggest is like extreme ways of overcoming certain kinds of graspings. Example of somebody venerating Buddha statue, but being mean to other people. And the teacher took away the Buddha statue. Hey, what's the point of bowing to it if you cannot recognize Buddha nature in sentient beings? You recognize Buddha nature and the object of veneration in wood and stone and gold, but not in sentient beings. What's the point of it? So sometimes you have to, even in your day-to-day practices, generally sort of constituting your religious piety, you have to evaluate and say, what is this practice really about? So if there is a grasping, there is no view. That you're not seeing things as clearly, as directly as Buddha would encourage you to do. So we'll take a pause here. Good, I didn't go over time.
Thank you, Venerable. There's a wonderful food for thought, and I'm still stuck on what if I have 200 years to live. Not sure I'm going to do so. Any questions from the floor, please? Please raise your hand and we'll pass you the microphone. Fire away. No questions about 200 years?
Good. I can get off early.
I have a question. I have a loud voice too. Hi. Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
So why do we grasp?
Why do we grasp? Because we see value in it. We see security in it. We see existence in it. We see hope in it. Not hope in the right sense of it. Sometimes we grasp just out of fear. Actually, most times we grasp just out of fear. Because we can't let go of things. Because we think, I will not be what I am if I let go of certain things. So all of those things become conditions of grasping, depending on different points in life.
I have one more question. How did we get here? Not here. I don't know how you got here, but I know how I got here. Now, how did we get here collectively as a human race in this intense, or especially now, even highly more intense grasping?
Again, we cannot generalize all of human race is prone to grasping. But the Buddhist worldview is we are here because we all share our passion for ignorance. Those who are not here don't share that passion. We all share our passion for misery. That's why we are all here. There are some who don't share that passion. But within this framework, as much as we talk about sort of the general sense of well-being, the general sense of liberation, and so on, you have to understand that spiritual practice is a highly individualized program, especially in the Buddhist worldview. You can meditate for 10 hours a day. I will not derive any benefit from it directly. I may be encouraged by observing you, saying, oh, this person meditates, or this person thinks about the world in this way. So despite of the common condition, for example, I don't think the Buddhist worldview has a collective karma theory. I think it started with Hume and others. Because it's palatable, and because we like to blame share in that blame of how we got here. But Buddhism is a very highly individualized exercise. I got here because I'm passionate about ignorance and grasping.
So I think the question to ask is, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
How can we keep motivation for working, learning, teaching, and living while removing desire and motivation, desire and attachment? How can we keep motivation while removing desire and attachment?
As an adult, if you look at common forms of why you want to learn, as an adult, there are two kinds of trajectory. One is that there's a utilitarian reason. Whatever I learn will become functional in some ways. I'll be able to apply it in some form. Well, the second form is show off. I want to tell other people how much I know. And so I fill myself with hours and hours of YouTube and Instagram stuff to tell other people how the world is going. It's very different from how a child wants to know. A child's sense of curiosity is simply a sense of wonderment that drives. This world is interesting. The world is such a place that there's constantly something to learn about, something to know. What the Buddhists are suggesting is that this sense of curiosity that a child displays for the external world, that if we can train them to display the same sense of curiosity about themselves as well. See, so that we become equally passionate, not just about the external world and what we know about it, but who this is, this internal world as well, exploring the mind and so on. That would sort of help perpetuate the conditions for curiosity. And it's not curiosity just for the sake of, I want to know more. Meaning, today, I've seen a lot of people who suggest curiosity, but it's not curiosity, it's FOMO. It's fear of missing out and of just not knowing things. But they mislabel it by saying it's curiosity. Some people become gung-ho about it. It becomes part of their daily discipline. They're like, for 1 hour, I surf the web looking at topics that I don't know about. That's fine. You will know that. But why is it that you can't spend 30 minutes quietening your mind and looking at your own mind and knowing about yourself? See? So there are different forms of curiosity that comes in. If it's simply driven by utilitarian aspect, or the aspect of where ego suggests that you should know more, that doesn't I don't think it's a healthy form. I think there's a whole generation going into that form. It's like people don't want to read books; they want summary. And it's like, I read 20 books a month. How can you read 20 books a month? Well, I listen to all the AI summarization. Now the jury is out, the research is out whether there's retention level 10 years down the road. You see, of these things. Or you're watching something. Watching a drama or a film, but then listening to somebody commenting on it while they're watching it. So you're getting a commentary on the drama. You don't get your own sense of visual experience or interpretation of looking at the thing. That's why I said that people are getting a skewed sense of aesthetics of what beauty is, because they're constantly being bombarded by somebody else saying, what is beauty? So the sense that I want to know myself, and in that manner, I want to know the nature of the world, the nature of reality. That is something wonderful. And it's remarkable that you find this in so many places as well. My litmus test, it might change tomorrow, but my litmus test at this stage is like, I meet individuals. Recently, when I was in a CC and some parts, even farmers, wine growers, or some people like that, and you ask them a question about certain thing, and you see a twinkle in their eyes of the joy of something they know, but the joy also of something they do not know. So that they will ask a question purely with this sense of, oh, I do want to understand this. Recently I encountered a gentleman and he was like, I'm 91 years old, I can't understand. How did I get through my life without asking this question? There was a twinkle in his eyes, you see, about the joy of asking that question. And that's what we need to retain.
Good evening. I hope you don't mind if I ask a question unrelated perhaps to the four attachments,
No, please
but
go ahead.
related to what you just talked about, curiosity. I'm very curious with all this talk about AI, what will be its impact on religions in general and on Buddhism in particular? My friend just told me earlier today that for one thing, AI may cause all the monks to lose their jobs. Because if we can ask all that we want to know through AI, we don't need monks to guide us anymore. What do you think of that?
That would be wonderful. I don't know how many monks get paid big bucks for teaching Dharma. That would be wonderful. I'll happily retire to a cave. But I don't think that's happening anytime soon. AI can become a good preacher. It won't become an astute mentor. That would be sort of a major distinction because the language models that they're trained on, so it can memorize 100 texts, and based on the question that you ask, it can give certain kinds of responses. But the spiritual teacher-student relationship is different in the sense that the spiritual teacher is not there eager to show off what they know. They are there to observe the nuances of what's going on in the student's mind and how to respond in an appropriate manner that the student can learn something from it. Now, the number of times you will see in Buddhist history when a student asks a teacher a question and the teacher just says, go meditate, or the teacher is just silent. AI wouldn't be able to do that yet.
Good evening. Thank you for sharing that question. That's also on my mind. So 2 years ago, when you came to this very same room, I asked you what you thought about artificial intelligence, and your answer then was it was augmented intelligence. But since then, we've seen so much stories in the news that both the creators of AI and the users of AI are doing the very exact thing you described, which is the immense grasping of a form that has no form. So people have stopped, they started divorcing their partners, they started having all these AI marriages. Younger kids are committing suicide. What do you think of all these phenomena?
I think it's a confused state. And it's a confused state in the sense that, very few of these AI company founders, many of them I know personally, I wouldn't suggest that their life is an ideal life, that people should mimic or replicate kind of thing, or that their worldview is an ideal worldview. There's a lot of confusion and commotion around those things. There's also a lot of hype around AI. AI is also not a replacement for common sense. We sort of, don't think of common sense very carefully at times. Recently, two tech leaders proposed of creating a device that would free people from the web of cellular technologies, social media, and so on and so forth, right? Because one of them is having a remorse for designing this thing, to create this kind of addiction. And so recently, when I was in the US, somebody asked what I thought, of these kinds of ventures, that now people are using AI-backed devices to reprogram humans. I said, reprogramming humans is a great thing. We have been trying to do that forever. But I gave an extreme analogy because sometimes humans only get extreme analogies. And I said, imagine if Pablo Escobar and another drug lord came to you and said, we have a de-addiction program. How much would you trust them? They spend their entire life making drugs, disseminating drugs. Then they come to you as advisors and policymakers and say, we're going to create something that is going to create de-addiction. Would you trust them? So that's what I mean. There's a lot of commotion, there's a lot of hype around these kinds of things. But one of the things that I've been speaking on, even fairly recently, I think about a month ago, was on being human in the age of AI, which is that all this development in AI is also a wonderful opportunity for humans to think, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be part of the human race? What does it mean to be part of humanity, and so on? Because right now, all we are doing is kind of a doomsday scenario, a doomsday calculation, which is bound to happen. There's no turning back the clock. Doomsday scenario in the sense that unemployment, joblessness, rise in mental illness, all this would be a product of AI. The creators might try to spin the story in a different manner, but that's not going to happen. So those are the things, again, we humans are very bad at preparedness, the sense of preparedness. Why social media caused the havoc for the last decade or so among young minds and old minds alike in terms of depression and so on and so forth is because they were introduced to a platform or technology without any sense of preparedness. You join the social media platform and they will tell you figure it out. Your friends are on it. And if you're not on it, you'll be missing out on something. We are again wasting a lot of time discussing capabilities of AI rather than discussing preparedness. How is it that humans should prepare for AI that is happening and that will be coming?
Sorry, I think two more people have questions, so I have a very short half question, and we have a short answer. My follow-up quick question is, I grew up in Asia, learned a lot about Eastern philosophy, and then I moved to America, and I was horrified because things like filial piety is, like you said, is very separate from the idea of having a MySpace and a MyBank account, and it's an immense fixation on the self. And based on your book cover, many of the people who wrote testimonials, they are also the people that are revered in America who control up to trillions of dollars of wealth. Where do you see yourself in the Buddhism placed in that confluence, I would say, between technology and philosophy and business, or even in something like you said more grounded in humanism?
As a Buddhist monk, I think I have two sort of goals besides just my own cultivation. One is alleviation of suffering. The second is to understand nature of reality. When you're in the enterprise of alleviation of suffering, you have to interact with all kinds of individuals, including those who are creators of suffering or perpetuators of suffering. And you try your best to discourage them from doing that. So, as a Buddhist monk, you have those kinds of roles to play. That is not to say that you're always successful, and so on. And then there are certain individuals who, even after they have become successful, get to the recognition that what they thought was success is not bringing them all that they wanted. That's why I was saying in the earlier part of my talk, nobody prepares you for success. Nobody prepares you for wealth, actually. You all desire it, but nobody prepares you for it.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for the very insightful sharing. I have a question on Avalokiteshvara. Just like you mentioned that Avalokiteshvara renounced his own liberation, enlightenment, in order to bring greater benefit.
He renounced entering into nirvana.
I see.
He's still enlightened, but he's renounced entering into nirvana.
I see, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I just didn't understand that point.
He's just standing at the door, ready to open and walk away. But he looks back and says, too many people still do that path.
Venerable, thank you very much for your teaching. I have two questions. Of course, the first one is related to the concept of self and meditation. You mentioned basically if we meditate without some sort of objectives, okay, it's actually quite pointless.
No, I did not say that.
Right.
I said if you meditate entirely with self-absorption, then it might lead to just inflation of ego. So you should take other sentient beings into consideration. So meaning the sense of care, the sense of compassion.
Does it mean like if we were to engage in like metta meditation, is that a remedy towards self-absorption?
It is a remedy. It is a remedy, but it's also a function of how you're doing metta meditation. But yes, it is.
Right. Then the second question, of course, we are actually in an age of the decline of the Dhamma, and like
we have been in that age for a while now.
Yeah, for a while. But then, in view of like the questions from some of the participants here tonight about the advent of AI, I mean, as Buddhist practitioners, lay practitioners, I mean, how do we actually stay the course, getting to the other shore, literally, you know, because there's so much influences, so much distractions around the world nowadays. What's your advice?
You know, that's the irony of, not the irony, but you know, the thing is that if you read Buddhist texts, all this was predicted in some ways. The total confusion, commotion, charlatans, self-proclaimed teachers, self-proclaimed enlightened beings. I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. It was all, like if you read text. So I'm not surprised by it. The challenge is just that, you know, it's a lot of noise, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of commotion. But when you're trying to sort of, at least in the first stages of meditation, simply try to figure out who you are. Simply figure out what this self is, what am I, kind of thing. You don't need all that stuff. And when you get to the stage where you have some inkling, some insights that are developing, then you recognize that you can go beyond a lot of things without having that stuff. So you look at that stuff just as pure entertainment. In worst cases, a waste of time. In other cases, just pure entertainment. But it's a lot of confusion. But it especially becomes confusion when people begin to seek entertainment out of spiritual teachers. So you'll see a lot of speakers, a lot of spiritual speakers, talking about random stuff. And you get to the, you look at all that and you say, well, it's entertaining, but it's not to be taken seriously. When, in the Buddhist tradition, when somebody came to you and said, why do you want to practice Dharma? And they said, I want to become a teacher. You slap the person on the face and you said, go home. Because the intent was different. You don't come to Buddha Dharma to become a teacher. You come to Buddha Dharma as a student. You learn to grow. And if you get to a stage when you're lucky and somebody says, oh, you should teach, then you teach. I don't know what the training of these influencers are. No. So that's what I mean, is that, I'm not surprised by any of it, because it says, the text that when they talk about the age of degeneration, they also say that in the future, most teachers will look for numbers, the number of followers, and they are not the right teachers to follow. It tells you explicitly. Yes.
Rinpoche, one question. First, thank you very much for the teaching tonight. With your teaching, there's always something new to digest. Renunciation.
You're trying to politely tell me my teaching is indigestion.
I will chew on it. Renunciation is difficult. Renunciation is very difficult. I mean, my point of view, in the sense that on the surface it looks easy to give up something, but in order to give up something, one actually needs a lot of courage. Giving up something that we are familiar with, even if it is not something that is useful, even if it's something that is not beneficial to us. But because, like you said, we are habitually clinging on to that, we cling on to that and we can't let it go. And in order to let that go, we actually need the courage to be able to let it go, and at the same time probably replace it. We likely want to replace it with something else.
Yeah, I mean, that's why renunciation is not proper renunciation, if it's not a willful, joyful act of letting go without seeking something in return. A lot of times, for example, when in India, this used to be a common occurrence where people will leave family and home to become a spiritual guru, and then they will ask, why do you want to become a spiritual guru? Well, I want to have a lot of followers. And in a billion people country, to have 3 million, 5 million people as followers is not a big deal. But the whole idea was that I want to have followers. And then you ask yourself, well, is that the right motivation to become a spiritual teacher? So that's why this constant introspection is necessary to understand the interwoven nature of these qualities of courage, renunciation. Also, when you become proficient in renunciation, you become more courageous. You have more fearlessness about these things. But almost every day, every other day, you will have an opportunity to think and reflect on these things and say, is it time to renounce this? Is it time to let go of this sort of thing? But it doesn't always, not all acts of renunciation need to be grand.
Sorry?
Not all acts of renunciation need to be grand.
Mm.
When we hear the word renunciation, we think of something climactic. Right? But it could be even simple acts of renunciation that you can engage in, but recognizing that it's conducive to your spiritual well-being.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So, like for instance, it's alright when we say in terms of like cultivation. So, what if you are faced with a situation whereby you know that it's like a toxic kind of relationship? Then we still have to respond to the person or to the relationship with kindness. I'm wondering how can we actually reframe our mind to respond with kindness?
It's hard. It's hard. The way you can make it easy is by firstly reflecting that perhaps this person is also suffering. Though they are making things more difficult, more toxic, they too are suffering in some form or the other. But at some point you have to ask yourself whether it's worth your time. Meaning, respond with kindness, respond with as much compassion, and so on. But at some point, you have to objectively evaluate that whether it is being helpful to the other person or not. Meaning that, is it creating just more dependency? Is it creating more, encouraging their toxicity much more? Then you have to think about getting them external help. Maybe somebody else needs to talk to them. Maybe they need to go through a therapy or some sort, and so on. But these kinds of things are challenging.
Any
Well,
other questions?
you shouldn't. One shouldn't be in a place. You see, the desire to help others, has to be grounded in the sense of wisdom and skillful means. The wisdom and skillful means here implying that, do I have all the resources to help this person, emotionally, materially, and otherwise? If not, then now it's two people suffering. So it's not just a kind of a blind emotional response that this person needs help, I should just help this person. You make effort, but at some point you also have to reorient yourself whether you're the right person to make that effort.
One last question, anyone? If not, we come to a close. Thank you so much, Venerable, for...
Since we have time because nobody's asking a question, I may have narrated the story, but I'm saying it again because of the notion of renunciation being challenging. There's an incident among the Kala masters, one of the Geshes, Kala masters. So he was getting ready to welcome some of his donors, devotees and donors. They were going to come visit him. So he was cleaning up his shrine, polishing the statues, cleaning up the shrine, and so on. And then, this guy is a Geshe. He's an advanced monk who has studied for a long time. But at that moment, he catches himself and says, I'm cleaning up the statue to impress the donors, these devotees who are going to come in. That's not the right motivation. So he goes out, picks up a bunch of dirt and throws it on the shrine. An extreme reaction in some ways, right? But the sense of vigilance, that even at that moment, and that's admirable. See, the sense of vigilance to say, there is grasping that is happening here too.
Yes.
Right, we do dedication. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable, for this wonderful evening.
Reread the text, reflect, meditate, introspect.
And what if we did for 200 years, right? So, thank you again for coming tonight and being with us, and what a way to wrap up the year with Venerable with us. I would like to thank Buddhist Library and the team of Teresa and all of the people around her that's helping her put this together. Thank you so much for making this happen. And we have the book Running Towards Mystery downstairs for sale. All proceeds to the Buddhist Library. Please buy your book and have it autographed right here by the man himself. Yes. And please, anyone with offerings, please approach the Rinpoche. And yeah. And thank you for everything.
How have you been? Since yesterday. It's okay. Don't need to kneel here. How are you? Since yesterday.